EU-Canada partnership and developments, as we heard from the previous session, there is a good reason to talk about Europe in the context of its relation to Canada, and also biography of John Main tells us that being overseas is always very useful to develop new ideas at home in Europe. And I'm sure that our recent history, where we have 20 years of renewed diplomatic connections to Canada since August 1991. Canada was the first from G7 countries who recognized the independence of Latvia at that time. And also in all the history was our diplomatic relationships are established already in 1921, as soon as Latvia was recognized in Europe. Canada at that time had been British Dominion, also based and recognized the existence, official legal existence of our country. And since then, there have been a lot of interesting moments in our history, good examples of cooperation and development projects. And of course, now they can be treated in more broader context, in the context of relationships between European Union, where we feel as part and parcel of it since more than 6 years. And this is a nice opportunity to have distinguished guests here, excellencies, Ambassador for Canada, Latvia, our former ambassadors, our representatives from European Union, and our colleagues from the university, now having come here together and probably sharing, taking the opportunity to share their experiences, their ideas about the possible future development. So my name is Indreks Muļņnieks, I'm Vice Rector for Research at the University of Latvia, and I'm happy to say that just recently we signed a number of agreements with Canadian universities about partnership in earth sciences and geological research, not just with an academic, but also with some sort of commercial interest. We shall see. No, it's just an example of recent developments, but yeah, not to take this position and position of chair too long, and but also giving the opportunity to our distinguished colleagues to share their experiences. I would be happy to pass the floor to our colleague, distinguished guest, who is very free here at the university, especially in the context of cooperation with European Studies Transitional Center here, to distinguished guest, Excellency. So it's yours. And probably then afterwards we can start our discussion as it is used in the clockwise manner, or the colleagues have some other, historical approach. But the first of all, is
we'll focus. Please use microphone. It's okay? Okay, if I put my head down and start mumbling, please just yell out because I want you to participate and be able to hear me. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, many Latvijas Latvijas Universitātē, I'm very very happy to be here today. And on a bright and sunny day, when we all would like to be outside, I'm just pleased that we're all here to think about our relationship, this relationship between Canada and Latvia. For many of us, that relationship starts on August 26, 1991, when we became the first G7 country to announce the reestablishment of diplomatic relations. For other people, it goes much further back to the 40s and to, you want me to use the microphone? Translators. Okay, sorry, I'll try and help the interpreters. So for Canada, for many of us, an important date is August 26, 1991, with the reestablishment of diplomatic relations. But for lots of other people, there was a much longer struggle to reach that point in 1991. I think it's good to look back, but it's also very important to look forward. And over the last 20 years, we've had a remarkable cooperation between Canadian institutions in terms of capacity building as Latvia marched forward to the European Union accession and to membership in NATO. And these were also important milestones for us. The Canadian International Development Agency spent a lot of money working with various Latvian organizations, teaching them French, teaching English, bringing experts together. And to show you how things have matured, last Tuesday night I attended a meeting of Ukrainian judges and lawyers, a meeting with the Latvian probation service and with a number of Latvian judges. So we're now at the point where this project is a joint partnership between the Ukraine, Latvia, and Canada. So we've come a long way in 20 years, and this is the wave of the future as far as I'm concerned, that we have shared goals and shared visions in lots of different places, so we can do an awful lot of work in the near neighborhood by forming these sort of alliances and partnerships. Obviously, when it comes to the situation in Libya, in Syria, again, we are coming to our colleagues here in Latvia and asking them their views on issues. Palestinian, the Palestine, some of the issues that took place in the UN last week. It's a dialogue of equals, of partners. And we're very pleased that that's the type of relationship we have. There are a lot of other things that have helped us build forward. In 2007, we removed the visitor visa requirement for the 3 Baltic states, and so Latvians could travel unimpeded and go and see their business and academic counterparts. And the U.S. government followed our lead about a year and a half later. So we're very, we think that's very emblematic of the type of cooperation, the type of relationship that we can have. Another issue we've talked about, academic exchanges. Over the past few years, we've more than 1,000 Latvian citizens have gone to Canada to work and study under the Youth Mobility Agreement, International Experience Canada. So these are the bricks, the mortar on which we build an even deeper relationship. I'm pleased that my colleague from the European Union is with us today, because perhaps the most important diplomatic initiative that Canada has in place right now is a drive to fulfill a comprehensive economic trade agreement with the European Union by the end of 2011, early 2012. And we see that as being very important in terms of expanding the level of trade, multilateral, bilateral, with Latvia and with other European states. That could be one of the engines that pulls us out of recession as we face some really severe economic challenges in all parts of the world. Again, I'm looking at Professor Moravska, and she's wondering, what am I going to say next? And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the type of cooperation that we have with the University of Latvia on Canadian studies and related issues. So we want to expand and build on these relationships. So I just wanted to make those very preliminary remarks, and later on I hope we have a chance to enlarge on some of these themes. And I'm very happy that on my right I have a very good contact in the SIMA and a person who's helped me understand Latvia at length, and who has a fine appreciation of popular music. So it's I'll hand the mic over to Ojārs.
Thank you. I may go up there.
So, just to make an introduction, the keynote will be given by the member of our parliament, the head of Foreign Relations Commission, Mr. Ojārs Kalniņš, who is also very experienced in the relationship in making contacts with overseas, who's the former head of also the Institute of Latvia. So, the floor is yours.
Standing up. I happen to be a Latvian who never lived in Canada, but I did grow up in a country nearby, just across the border of Canada. But Canada has a special place in my heart because of an event that took place in 1991. We all know that Canada and Latvia established renewed diplomatic ties on August 26th of 1991. The country that I happened to be living and working in at that time took a few days longer to recognize Latvia well on that. But for me, December 15th, 1991 was a very special day because it was on this day that I flew from Washington, D.C. to Toronto, Canada to become a Latvian diplomat. Oddly enough, not to Canada, but to the United States. And the reason for this is very simple. It turns out I hadn't been a naturalized U.S. citizen in 1991. When the Latvian government asked me to become a diplomat at the embassy, a minister counselor, I had to give up my U.S. citizenship to get full diplomatic accreditation. And it turns out that you cannot give up your U.S. citizenship on U.S. territory. You have to leave the country and then be let back in if they let you. And so I made an arrangement with the State Department, and on December 15th in the morning I flew to Toronto, Canada, went to the U.S. consulate, turned in my U.S. passport, exchanged documents. I was interviewed by an embassy official who wanted to know if I was in my right mind. Apparently they do this with anyone who wants to give up their U.S. citizenship. I convinced them that I was, and I left there with my Latvian diplomatic passport and diplomatic visa and flew back to Washington that evening as a Latvian diplomat accredited to the United States. So for me, this was a very special moment, and I was very glad that I could do it in Canada. Although this isn't the reason I chose to become chairman of the Parliament's Friendship Committee with Canada last year, it is something that I recall with a great deal of fondness. There's no question, as Ambassador Hedrick said, that Latvia's relationship with Canada has been outstanding for the last 20 years. I'd like to think that we've contributed a great deal to each other. headlines in Latvia involved is Daļa, who was head of the Election Reform Commission here, has just been elected to Parliament, to the new Parliament, and has some opinions that are making headlines. And I guess that's typical of Canadian Latvians who take a very active role in life here in Latvia. And lastly, I think Canada has honored us with one of their more outstanding diplomats, and that's Scott Pedrington. And not only Scott, but together with his wife Elizabeth, they have both become very popular diplomatic couple here in Riga. And Scott seems to like it here so much that it seems like he's having a very difficult time staying in touch, which we all love him, because we all say goodbye to him several times over. And maybe this will go on until the next year. Canada has played a very key role in fostering Latvia's membership in NATO. And it's interesting that here in Europe, a lot of people, when they talk about the transatlantic alliance, they usually think of the United States. And you almost get the impression as if this is the U.S.-European transatlantic alliance, but it's really the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And which is much better, because if it were the U.S.-European Treaty Organization, the acronym would be terrible. NATO sounds much better, but I think it also is significant because Canada is much more a North Atlantic country than the United States. The U.S. has a little bit of the North Atlantic. But many people forget that Canada is a key player of NATO, and another reason why it's a North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And here again, Canada, being one of the first countries to recognize Latvia's independence in '91, was also one of the first NATO countries to ratify NATO membership protocols for Latvia in 2003. Latvia and Canada have had outstanding cooperation over the years, especially in Afghanistan, where our troops and advisors have worked together side by side. Canada, like a lot of other countries involved in the ISAF mission in Afghanistan, is reassessing and changing its role there. Canada is now investing more effort and time into children and youth development, focusing on rule of law and human rights, and getting more engaged in regional diplomacy. In October, the UN mandate for operations in Afghanistan will be reviewed once more, and the next Latvian cycle, the 11th cycle, will also have to decide how and if we continue our role in Afghanistan. Given that we share a great deal of goals and values in common with Canada, I think this may be an area where we also will look at the Canadian example of how maybe the transition to role in still providing help to the people of Afghanistan, and perhaps in a different way. It'll be up to our new Parliament to make this decision. As I mentioned, Canada often doesn't get the credit it deserves, largely because of its southern neighbor. But Canada has been playing a major international role in peacekeeping around the world. It's one of the top providers of financial contributions to the UN peacekeeping budget. It provides troops to various UN peacekeeping missions, and plays a key role in initiatives aimed at fostering international peace and stability. During this last year, when I served as chairman of the Simon's Foreign Affairs Committee, I tried to focus on the importance of Eastern Partnership, which Ambassador Pedrington has just mentioned. And I think it's commendable that Canada, being geographically so distant, has such a commitment to the Eastern Partnership, particularly to Ukraine. For Latvia, Georgia and Moldova are also two very important countries on the eastern border. Two European countries who are trying very hard to be a part of the European Union. They have some problems that need to be resolved by the entire European Union. And in the past, we in Latvia have had programs in these countries, and we've been grateful for the support that the Canadian International Development Agency, CEDA, has offered. Unfortunately, the massive budget consolidations here in Latvia has cut off all of our funding for cooperative development. And so we hope that once we do have funding to resume this activity, we'll be able to work with Canada again in this area. It's no secret that trade and economic issues are important to Latvia, to countries around the world, and as we always say, we look forward to deepening and strengthening our bilateral economic ties with Canada. We also support the Canadian negotiations with the EU on SEFTA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, because we know that once that agreement is reached, that will be good for Latvia and our bilateral relationship. Our ports offer enormous potential. There has been discussion between our ports and the Canadian ports in the past, and our business communities could and should be doing a lot more. But we have had some successes. It may seem a bit precarious to talk about a successful relationship between Air Baltic and Bombardier at this point in time because of Air Baltic being in the news for other reasons. But this has been a successful relationship, and I have to say that every time I get on a Bombardier plane, flying to Brussels or Copenhagen or somewhere else, I do feel secure, and I'm very grateful for Canadian engineering, craftsmanship, and quality. So this has been successful. There are people in the government who are looking for perhaps new foreign investors for Air Baltic. Perhaps this is an area that Canada could look at. And the reason I mention that is because there's another story that few people know about, and that is that not too long ago, a Latvian company took over a Canadian company. You usually don't hear about this. But we took over, or our people, young men who were in charge of a company called Reģionu, ended up taking this technology that was invented in Canada, developed in Canada, wind tunnel technology, and they made it such a success that the family owners of this company were willing to turn it over to the Latvian entrepreneurs. And so today, Reģionu is a Latvian company built around Canadian technology. They were the ones who created our spectacular pavilion in Shanghai at the World Expo. And so, if indeed a Latvian company can take over a Canadian company, then perhaps there may be some Canadians who might want to live in Baltic. One of the reasons for Latvia's economic recovery is intergrowth in exports, which we've had across the board. When I looked at the numbers, I noticed that also exports to Canada have increased. Not a huge amount, but about 21%. What surprised me was that a major part of that export was Latvian alcoholic beverages to Canada. Now, I'm not sure what we are exporting to Canada, because I know that good beer, but we also have excellent beer. We don't have much of a wine industry here, and nor do you, but you do make some ice wine, I'm told. So perhaps it's being a black balsam, which may be very good for people living up in the far north. But I found that a very interesting factor. And, as far as I'm concerned, I hope that continues. And one thing I'd like to see in return is some more Canadian maple syrup, which we seem to have a shortage of here in Latvia. And finally, I will apologize if this comes across as an inside joke between myself and Ambassador Hetherington, but
Thank you, Mr. Kalniņš and Mrs. President.
I guess statements and discussion and questions will come later once after we have made the first round of speakers, and now I have the pleasure to give floor to our distinguished guests. Now the representative of the head of the European representation here in Latvia, but also our professor and one of the starters of this European and Transitional Studies Center, Professor Steinbucke. Please.
Thank you very much for passing the floor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I doubt I would be able to give to my intervention this personal touch as Ambassador Kalniņš made it. So I'm representing here indeed the European Commission. And Canada is one of the European Union's oldest and closest partners. What started out in the 1950s as a purely economic relationship has evolved over the years to become a close strategic partnership. The relationship between what was then the European Economic Community and Canada was first formalized in 1976 through the Framework Agreement on Economic Cooperation. This was the first agreement of its kind between European communities and an industrialized third country. The European Union and Canada work closely together on global challenges such as the environment, climate change, energy security, everything we call in Europe beyond GDP, sustainable development and climate change, throughout the world. This cooperation stretches from research into alternative energy sources to providing police training in Afghanistan. So indeed, this is very broad topics covered by our partnership. European and Canadian representatives most regularly meet to exchange views, from yearly bilateral summits of leaders to meetings between officials on specific issues. The European Union-Canada Partnership Agenda, adopted in Ottawa in 2004, identifies ways of working together to move forward, especially where joint action can achieve more than acting alone. And this brings me to the economic problems of today, and Ambassador already mentioned the severe economic crisis which we feel here in Latvia, we feel in Europe, and in a much broader context. Indeed, only economic cooperation and mutual support, and also trade and investment, can try to lead the countries, not only European Union and Eurozone, but in indeed broader context, out of the crisis. Our economic cooperation should become indeed an engine of growth and prosperity in the future. And it brings me also to some figures and some facts which I would like to mention here. Economic relations remain at the heart of the EU-Canada relationship. In 2009, trade in merchandise between the EU27 and Canada accounted for about 40 billion. Trade in services between Canada and the EU27 amounted to about 21 billion in 2008. EU-Canada investment in 2007 was worth 275 billion. I'm very sorry for bringing you relatively old data, but I'm afraid it is the feature of sort of international comparison when some data, some recent data are still lagging behind. But as I was working in Eurostat for about 6 years, I promised to update you and myself on the most recent figures. Well, some more information. After the United States, the EU is Canada's most important trading partner, while Canada ranks 11th among the EU trading partners. The EU is also the second larger investor in Canada after the United States, while Canada ranks third larger investor in the EU. The EU and Canada are committed to build on these strong economic ties, and this commitment is indeed extremely important today. In addition to trade, other policy sectors are important in the relationship: justice and home affairs, science and technology, education and training. So I will not mention any more figures and any more facts, but one more fact, but it will concern the university. I would like finally to mention a continuous success of EU-Canada public diplomacy call for proposals, which supports projects promoting knowledge and understanding of the EU among Canadians and debate about EU-Canada relations. And exactly in this context, I am very pleased to note that our host of today, University of Latvia and Professor Moravska, have been among the beneficiaries of the program with an inter-university partnership forum for comparative dialogue. So, having said this, let me wish you again a lot of success. I'm talking now about the university and Jean Monnet Center of Excellence, and I would like to wish further development of the EU-Canadian partnership. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Moravska. And since our meeting and discussion is related to the anniversary of our diplomatical relationships and public ties to Canada, it's our pleasure to have two ambassadors of Latvia to Canada. The first one who started after the renewal of the relationships, Professor Andrejevs, who was also the foreign minister of Latvia afterwards. So, Professor, are you going to see?
Honorable Vice Secretary, Professor Moravska, Your Excellency Ambassador President, dear panelists, ladies and gentlemen. The main reason of my presentation is to remind you of some of the facts from our recent past and the very beginning of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Latvia and Canada. As all you know, it happened in August 1991, and Canada was the first from the G7 countries recognizing our historical independence. In order to demonstrate the political situation at that time, I want to quote John Hayden and Patrick Stein, who in 1991, in their book, The Baltic Nations and Europe, stated the following, I quote, "As historians, we cannot help being struck by the extraordinary parallels between the present and the past, predicaments of Baltic people. In 1990, in the ruins of the Soviet Empire, they faced challenges very similar to those their predecessors faced in 1920, in the ruins of Tsar's Empire. No understanding of the current situation in the Baltic republics is possible without the knowledge of history." End of quote. The Baltic states were the only countries in the former USSR that expressed their will to join the European Even 10 years later, they were still candidate countries. On August 24th, 2001, the President of the Republic of Latvia, a former entity, as you heard, from Canada, from Latvia to Canada, Dr. Violet Freiberg at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., in her address called Completing the New Europe, the Baltic Dimension, stating the following, and I quote once more. NATO and the European Union have provided the backbone for Europe's success during the past 50 years. They are twin institutional pillars of the Euro-Atlantic. A closely integrated and effective European Union, supported by a strong and enlarged NATO alliance, will fulfill our common vision of a continent that is secure, stable, and prosperous. End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why I mention those abstracts is to stress the vital need for international understanding, support, and help to overcome the multiple difficulties and obstacles Latvia was facing during the 90s of the last century. That was why, in spite of financial shortages, Latvia decided to enlarge its diplomatic representation abroad. In this context, Canada was chosen for several reasons. First of all, for political reasons. During that time, Canada was, and still is considered, one of the largest and the most democratic countries in the world. A strong NATO supporter, and a new homeland for tens of thousands of Latvian refugees after the Second World War. Canada never recognized the occupation and incorporation of the Baltic states by Soviet Union. During January 1991 tragic events in Latvia, an extraordinary session of the Canadian Parliament took place in Ottawa, and as the following a strong message was sent to Moscow. At all the international organizations, the UN and CSCC, Canada demanded unconditional withdrawal of Russian troops from the territory of Baltic states. After regaining our independence, Canada was a strong supporter of our desire to integrate into the European Union. Secondly, from the very beginning of our renewed statehood, Canada offered Latvia significant financial help. During the period from 1991 to 1995, Latvia received $7 million Canadian for technical support programs. My presence in Canada as the first ambassador of Latvia was from 1995 to 1998. Working hand in hand with the Latvian National Association in Canada and the Canadian governmental institutions, mainly the Canadian International Development Agency, CEDA, as well as with different other organizations and institutions, several socio-economic programs were initiated and completed. Let me mention just some of those which I assume are the most important within the European context. I will just name them without any further details. They are ready, I am ready to give them if there will be such a need. First, the assignation of 1.3 million Canadian dollars for the Latvian Center of Terminology and Translation of the European Union legislative acts and laws. It's a direct influence supporting Latvia's move towards reintegration to Europe. Cooperation in science and technology, signing a memorandum of understanding between the Latvian Academy of Sciences and the Royal Society of Canada. Cooperation in Cooperation in education, as close cooperation with exchange programs and teachers between the universities of Ottawa, Buffalo, and the University of Economics. Signing the Twin City Agreement between Riga and Toronto. Demonstration of Latvian art and culture during the 10th Latvian Song and Dance Festival in Toronto. Regular information of the Canadian Society concerning the ethnic composition and citizen issues in Latvia. Just some examples. On November 5th, 1994, Ambassador of the United States for the Republic of Latvia, or his college, attended a symposium in Toronto entitled Policies and Realities, Minorities in the Baltic Republics, and presented our government policies reflecting the tragic results of the Soviet occupation and colonization. On January 22, 1996, Nicholas Etheridge, who served as Canada's first president, head of mission to Baltic states since the newly won independence, gave an informal talk at the Carleton University in Ottawa titled Inter-Ethnic Relations in the Baltic States, What Might the Future Hold? On March 13, 1996, at the panel named the Baltic States, 5 years after independence, which was organized by Toronto branch of the Canadian Institute of International Affairs, I did present a paper on Latvia's second escape from the empire to civil society. And following on January 26, 1997, I delivered an opening address in Ottawa on the occasion of the 76th anniversary of the de jure recognition of the Republic of Latvia and the evening of Latvian Hymns. Regular information of the Canadian government and the Parliament concerning Latvia's policy on the NATO enlargement. Investigation together with Canadian ministries the correct indices of mutual trade and who was to blame from our side. There was discrepancy between figures which were published in Latvia, in Riga, and that we found out in Canada. Some from our side just were hiding something, and that decreased Latvia's involvement with this mutual trade. Participation in organization of the Baltic evenings at the Canadian Parliament. And now a very difficult language that I cannot do otherwise, as it was called at that time. Participation in the organization of the Nunavut Arctic College National Model United Nations Student Group. Counseling and preparation to present Latvia as a state in Model United Nations Conference in New York. Facilitating the fact-finding mission to Latvia and a meeting with the President of Latvia with its owners. Dear future PhD holders, as my conclusion, I would like to give you a quote of President of the United States, Herbert Hoover, written in 1938, following his visit to Latvia. Listen. The Baltic states, in contrast to the Soviet Union, had a free economy. Their currencies were stable and were accepted all over the world. Their fiscal policies were completely successful. Their budgets were all balanced. Their industries were thriving. Their agriculture was making an astonishing progress. The result was that the standard of living in the Baltic states was about as high as any standard of living in Europe at all. I hope you will strive to achieve the same for Latvia. Now we remember the state of the European Union, and it's good to know that you can always count on Canada's support and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for the recollection of those wonderful facts of the previous cooperation between Latvia and Canada. The cooperation and work is going on, and the ambassador who recently left our partner country over the Atlantics is Dr. Madars Krams. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Secretary.
Indeed, it was a privilege for me to serve the Latvian ambassador in Canada for the previous 4 years. And after serving those 4 years, coming back, I just realized how much similar we are. We share the same global world. We are free democracies, we are free market economies, we are partners in NATO, and we will be more integrated through enhanced Canada-EU cooperation. We share our beautiful nature and Latvian experience in both countries, so that means we both have wonderful people. And I should say it's not the least, we share a similar passion for hockey and even for lacrosse. And just listening people who spoke before me, I just realized how similar we are in our evaluation of our relationship. And by that I'd like to already apologize if I say something what has been already said, but at the same time I'd like to say those key events and key milestones which are important for us. First of all, I think it's can emphasize enough that Canada never recognized the annexation of Latvia by the Soviet Union, and also I'd like to stress once more that Canada was the first among the G7 countries who recognized officially announced who recognized the re-establishment of our country and officially announced re-establishment again of the diplomatic relations with all the Baltic states. And during those decisive days in August of 1991, when Latvian independence was restored de facto, it was extremely important to receive this international support. Therefore, the decision by Canada to be able to recognize Latvia was a very emotional and moving moment for us. And it was great for me personally when I attended Cyber recently to see those originals of the documents of recognition and the reproductions of the documents to be viewed also during the exhibition of the Canadian Embassy, and I believe these documents are also can be viewed here, just outside this room. I should also express our appreciation for those for the support Canada provided to Latvia, particularly at the beginning of our independence, in the years of independence, for development projects in support of new free market economy, for democratic and effective governance, as well as to strengthen the economic relations and also healthcare and also social reform. Canadian International Development Agency has been very instrumental in providing assistance for these reforms in Latvia, and just to be smart, so organization technologies and information services, training for judges. These are just a few examples that contribute to our development. Again, not to repeat, I just want to underline that there has been a very good experience in cooperating between Latvian and Canadian experts in the third countries, and I just like to wish that this cooperation continues, as we saw a very good example of cooperation of this kind of interaction between the development programs, for example, in Ukraine, in the region of eastern neighbors. And I'd like to say that Latvia is ready to We are also partners in NATO. As it was mentioned, Canada was the first to ratify the Latvian accession protocols to NATO. We also highly value Canadian involvement in the operation in Afghanistan. We also paid tribute to those who sacrificed their lives, even their lives, sacrificed their efforts for rebuilding this country. Once more, as was mentioned by the Council, for example, we should commend Canada for its involvement in peacekeeping operations, but probably I'd like to more focus on the cooperation in other fields, particularly in developing of economic ties. And I think that there is still unutilized possibilities to do so. As statistics show, these economic ties are not that highly developed, but I think the potential is still very much there. Already in 2010, the trade volumes between Latvia and Canada increased. One could consider that these trade relations are occasional time, but I think it's just for people from both sides to work together, businesses to work together, to strengthen those ties, to develop trade links. These ties will be strengthened through various channels, either it should be through official ones, through chambers, or through NGOs. Of course, we'd like to see more business people coming from Canada here too, and when I was in Canada, I mentioned this recommendation to the Trade Minister of those times, Peter Now there was a shuffling of the cabinet, but anyway, I think the message is still there. I'm pretty confident that Latvia has a lot to offer, and in case such visit takes place, I'm sure that this visit will be rich and far-reaching. And just to mention some sectors where this could be developed, I'd like to mention the food industry, the machinery, IT sector, pharmaceutical, transit and logistics. And I believe there is very much already achieved so far we could build on. First of all, I'd like to mention that kind of infrastructure could be set up connecting ports between Latvia and Canada, particularly Atlantic Canada. And I think that in this case, again, there is lots of similarities because we both, on both sides of this link, we share advantages, geographic location, connecting to even bigger markets. I think what also could be of interest for our business people could be connecting Finally, I'd like to emphasize that the good relationship between Canada and Latvia has been always contributed by those visits between our official representatives. The highest one was the state visit of our president, in February 2006. Then there has been exchange of our parliamentarians. The Latvian speaker of Saigon visited Canada, which was reciprocated also by the speaker of Senate of Canada, visit to Latvia, the exchange of the visits of ministers, and other too. I think what's also important to mention is that the notable link between Latvia and Canada is underlined by the fact that Canada has become a home for a large Latvian diaspora, particularly of those who settled in Canada after the Second World War, and a community that provided many key people for the established Latvian state. Over the years, of these years of last 20 years, many people from that diaspora are returned to their home country, and I believe that this solid community has the potential to become even stronger bridge between our two countries. Also, the lifting of visa requirements for citizens of Latvia in 2007 facilitated people-to-people contacts with development of economic and cultural ties, as well as closer cooperation with Latvian diaspora in Canada. And finally, being without more on a general scale, not only bilateral but also on the national level of our relations have become more intense. Latvia and Canada has developed a friendly and sincere relationship by being united in the desire to participate in the strengthening of democracy, economic and social development of the world.
So thank you. We have listened to the first round of presentations, and probably we have already identified a number of topics which come up through all the talks we have heard. This is cultural relationships, Latvian diaspora and Canadian exchange, joint activities in mission, in international missions, also trade, economical relationships. Please, dear colleagues, the audience, any statements, questions? Please, if there are some questions or statements, feel free. Please identify yourself, please. And
Martin Sassens from Canada, representing Latvian National Federation in Canada, as well as World Federation of Free Latvians. A little comment to Ojar's first. Canada has excellent wines from Okanagan Valley, as well as Niagara Peninsula, not only ice wine. Because of the warming climate, we have excellent wines. The agreement between Canada and EU, I guess it was started with the government of Quebec, with the Charest government, and it will be signed supposedly end of this year, beginning of next. What will it bring in relations with EU and Canada? This is directly to Mr. Hetherington.
I think the key thing is, as I mentioned earlier, we want to open up the trade to flow in both directions. So trade in services, trade in products, to remove any of the barriers, to ensure that there's free and fair procurement. So one of the things that the European community is concerned about is that provinces across Canada speak with one voice on procurement, and I think that will be the case. From our side, we want access to European markets. And we want European taxpayers to have the benefit of the best possible product, whatever it is. And we want the same thing for the Canadian taxpayer. And we feel that we can lift terms of trade quite substantially in both directions. We're talking about billions of dollars. We're not talking about small amounts of money. And it has direct and indirect effects. So for example, if Rīgas Vagons Rūpniecība, if they produce a train, they can do it with Spanish, with Swiss, with Canadian partners, or they can do it in various combinations. It can be that the factories are located in 12, 13, 14 countries that will eventually put a train together. It's the same thing with aviation. The business plan that Estonian Air or Air Baltic has depends on getting the right plane at the right time at the right price. And there are 5 or 6 countries can produce planes for them. And again, we want a process where they purchase the best planes at the best price. And again, it improves the effectiveness of the airline or the train. So we're very anxious that passenger Vilcians make up their mind and purchase some trains and get that investment going, get jobs going here. We hope that in some way Canadian companies can contract, subcontract within that framework. So everyone in the world is floating in the same ocean of debt, and we have to work our way back. And so we think this agreement can pull us out, can open up possibilities. And we want to create jobs in Latvia, because then Latvians will purchase our products. We want to create jobs in Canada, in the States. And with the integration of Canada, Mexico, and the US, when we start trading with the European Union, it creates jobs all over the planet. And so that's our plan, and we think we have strong political support in Europe, but we have excellent support in the Baltics, as Oyars had mentioned. And we really appreciate that help. So maybe we helped Latvia at critical moments, but guess what? Latvia's supporting us at critical moments as well.
Well, thank you for this very detailed response to the question. It makes my job very easy. Indeed, removing and eliminating barrier to the free trade is very crucial, especially in the time of economic crisis, in the time of recession, because as Ambassador said, it promotes growth, it promotes additional working places. But what is also extremely important about the free trade, it's the interest of consumers, because when consumers have a good choice of trades and services for a reasonable price, for a very good quality, it always comes to their interest. And consumers suffered, first of all, because of social and economic consequences of the crisis around Europe. We see it in Latvia, we see it in the other European countries. So promoting the trade between 2 big nations, and Latvia is a part of 27 European member states, of course, will come to serve the interest of consumers, European citizens. First of all, I already mentioned that the European Union is the 3rd biggest trade partner with Canada, so it's already now, and I think that further increase of exchange of goods and services between the European Union from one side and Canada from the other side will definitely serve to the interest of their citizens.
I just wanted to also thank Martin for illuminating me about Canadian wines. Perhaps we should go to Gastronome or Beansat and start demanding Canadian exports. I should also point out that Martin was a candidate to the Parliament in this recent election. But my question remains, and I don't know if one of our ambassadors can answer, is that I still don't know what alcohol it is that we are selling to Canada.
That's an easy one. In Canada, we really like Stolichnaya Russian vodka, and it's produced here in Riga. So, when I get back to Canada, I will continue to recommend black balsams, but I think Stolichnaya is a pretty decent vodka. So that earns a lot of money.
Well, I would like to add a bit about economical and developments in this field, because not just trade, but also the exchange of new technologies, which is probably a specific sort of, let's say, very intellectual trade, can contribute to the development of economics. And I have, for my personal experience, just an interesting, probably an example, because where Latvians were benefiting from the support from this technological aid program you mentioned, which was in action in the first half already of 90s. At that time, one of our compatriots who lived in Canada decided to, remembering apparently the old wisdom that Latvians and Baltic tribes altogether are mushroom lovers, and Edwards from Toronto decided to move shiitake growing from Canada to Latvia. And of course, it couldn't be done without the help of a university, and being biologist myself, so we started from very, very small spores of the spawn and started to distributing them among our farmers in different places of Latvia. And in fact, it succeeded. This enterprise succeeded, and although during the time when the real estate markets boomed, the peasants, probably the farmers, were not that interested in growing that stuff, mushrooms. But now, recently, I just met some of those to whom we cooperated at the very beginning and who benefited from this exchange with Canada. And you see, nowadays they are selling the mushroom stuff for 15 to 20 lats per kilogram, which is incredible prices here in Latvia. But they are asked, and they cannot even satisfy all the demand which is coming around. So not only the highest technologies, even technologies at, let's say, agricultural foodstuff level can be very beneficial and can help for this sort of developments, and probably someday ahead we'll get back to Canada with a new mushroom technologies or new technologies which can be developed on those bases. So thank you also for that. But I had a question, if I may take this position. You mentioned about our ties which have been developed during the international missions in Afghanistan, where our soldiers were side by side working to help the country. And you mentioned also, which is quite of course burning question in future, what will be decided about this mission in future. And you mentioned that there will be some probably other approach taken for the next period. What sort of approach, what could be the new solutions for this mission?
Well, I think the key issue is that the change of the mandate of the mission. We've moved from a combat role to training and capacity building of the Afghan army and of the police. And when you look at the news, sometimes you can become quite disheartened, because it's an ongoing challenge to move the society forward. We've also talked about facilitating a political settlement, and that may yet happen. But when there are attacks on Rabbani and others and people are murdered, it's a little hard to see the way forward just in the short term. But over the long run, we have to rebuild capacity, and I think there's some success being made in that regard. You have to do things like inoculate children against early childhood diseases. You have to support education. You have to support the participation of women in education in all spheres of life. And you have to rebuild infrastructure. So that's where dams, providing water, anti-drug programs. So there's a whole host of things that we have to continue to pursue. But you do need to be able to protect officials and aid workers in terms of fulfilling their mandate. So this is the challenge that we have in Afghanistan, is protecting the peacemakers, protecting people who are working in development agencies, and seeking peace and accommodation within Afghan society. And so our immediate concern is rebuilding the army, the police, the prison service, and here again, Latvia has a very well-developed probation service. There's no reason why Latvians who know the area now quite well can't participate in capacity building as the government deals with the debt, as Oyars was saying. There were things that were not possibly for Latvia in 2009, 2010, but in the future, Latvia will play a role. So those are ideas that we have. We've been able to turn our attention to those issues because our fiscal framework was in a little bit better shape than some countries, but we will need other partners, and I think Latvia can help on a number of fronts, as can Lithuania, as can Estonia.
Thank you. Please, questions or statements? Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I would like to add one component to the whole discussion, and that is about the academic exchange and academic support that we had received from Canada. And it was the time when he left for classes, the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Management with the Dean, Professor Purgelis. And then there was an agreement about running a project that was for 6 years, financed by CIDE and run by Halifax, Professor Barry Lesser. He's coming, by the way, next week to teach, to give a lecture, to give a seminar. At the same time, he is coming to do research in Latvia. So Canada is very much still interested how Latvia is doing in the monetary issues. So that was the project for 6 years, as I already mentioned, for the 3 Baltic countries, not only Latvia, but as well as Estonia and Lithuania, support to provide additional knowledge to public servants in all 3 countries, and also to retrain teachers at the universities in the 3 Baltic states. It was very successful. A lot of people were involved, and we can probably hardly find a public servant in Latvia at that time that was not going through the project. So it was great support from Canada and building administrative capacity in our countries. So that's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
And what about the prospects for this program? So 6 years have been. So I think, thank you. So, questions, statements, please. no additional problems haven't. So apparently we have been very clear and very also expressive and efficient in all our statements, and if there are no urgent things to be settled, or is there? If there, please.
I just wanted to say hello because I'm a Canadian and I just arrived in Riga a week ago. I'm from Newfoundland, Canada, and I have to say that my experience so far has been excellent, and I really think Riga is a really interesting place, and as well as the university. I think it's a great opportunity for myself as a Canadian to come over here and work at the Centre for Transition Studies. So that's all I really wanted to say, was that I'm really enjoying myself, and I think that I hope that more Canadian youth will also gain interest in Riga and Latvia in general and the Baltics and visit as well. Thank you.
This is the result of our cooperation with Ottawa University. Right?
I just wanted to add another comment about Canada. For many years I headed the Latvian Institute, which dealt with nation branding, and we did a lot of research on nation branding around the world and how countries dealt with it. And one of our advisors was Simon Anholt from the UK, who is considered the father of this concept of nation branding, and his organization had done research judging public opinion of countries, and in all of their research Canada was always up at the top as one of the most positively perceived countries in the world. And there was a lot of analysis done about this, about why. It was clear that they have one of the best flags, purely from a design point of view in terms of a symbol. An ad agency couldn't do better than that. I mean, it's just so memorable, and it's great. The other more cynical comment was that many people love Canada because it seems like a better version of the United States, without all of the drawbacks. But in studying Canada, I have to say that we did a lot of looking at their tourism promotion and other image campaigns, and I will say that the country has done an excellent job with promoting itself around the world, and maybe it goes beyond some of these perceptions. And I think when Latvia is back on its feet economically and we have more to talk about, it's another country that we can learn a great deal from in terms of promoting tourism, a better public image around the world. And the other thing that Scott mentioned about the music, that's an area where probably Canada has not done such a good job, because most of the great musical artists you have, people don't even realize they're from Canada. You know, like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell and all that. So maybe it doesn't matter, but that's another area. But I will, one small piece of trivia is that just recently the Latvian group Čikāgas Piecīši had one of their last concerts here, and I've known these guys for 30 years, and they're people keep changing, but in their last incarnation they have a Latvian Canadian singer, Linda Marut, who joined them, who was also put on an album, who's a successful Canadian musician, so she's also part of the music scene here.
One last comment. Thank you for mentioning how positive your experience in Latvia has been, because that's the case of all of our interns, and I think one of the challenges we have is to make sure there are more Canadian interns in Latvia and more Latvian interns in Canada, to try and extend the knowledge of the two societies. That's how you build these things. On the branding issue, I think that Latvia needs a slogan, needs somebody to sell it, because it's got a very good product. It's a very cool place with very cool music, and it's just a question of how do we do that. And you know, if you think of Erodium, at Beijing. They did, as you said, they did sell Latvia as a very cool, very innovative place, and we were talking about imants lauks as well, so we have to do a little bit more of that work, and that's something I'm committed to doing when I go back to Canada.
No, thank you. Yes, please.
This week, World Federation of Free Latvians are having their yearly get-together in Riga on the 28th, 29th and 30th of September. And one of the projects that we are going to discuss is something that will bring Latvian youth or Canadians in general to Latvia. This project will be discussed and developed in the next few months, and it's basically, in translation, spend 1 year in Latvia. So this is a partnership between private enterprise here in Latvia and enterprises or people around the world, because we are from representatives from Australia, Canada, United States, all Western Europe, and even Russia. So we have great knowledge of the markets, and we'll try to bring this project to fruition and bring some people over here. Thanks.
Study or to stay and work, and it's for students or for youth in general, for young people in general?
Actually, it's on a very mature level. It is to stay in Latvia and gain knowledge and partner with the people that need certain knowledge levels. We'll say it will be in IT industries, in tourism, be it in winemaking, and anything that will make a partnership blossom. So this is a stay that a person will be chosen full-time or at least part-time employee here in Latvia, and direct these people to certain enterprise that will be applying. And we already have a few signed up, but I don't want to mention right now because I don't want to be too early in these statements.
Also mushroom growing.
Also mushroom growing.
So, that's nice. Please, probably some doctoral students, they are usually some slowly coming up with their questions and experiences. So, yes, please.
Hello, my name is Dana Shurova. I just would like to share experience because as we talk about also youth mobility program in Canada, so I can just share that I've been there through this program. Thank you very much for this chance. And then therefore, actually, I would like to ask if it's probably not a secret, or I don't know. I know a lot of people still want to go there and have experience, but unfortunately, basically places are shortened very much compared to last year's. Maybe you can tell us about why this problem is like that, Thank you.
I'll stand up for this answer. Well, there are a number of issues that I think, I know there are a number of issues that are on people's minds. You've probably heard over the past year people looking at the demographic decline of population all over Western Europe. And all policymakers in all countries, whether it's Russia or parts of Western Europe, they're concerned about demographic decline. And within the Baltics, some policymakers are concerned about the impact that has on the native population or subcomponents of the population. And so some people are really, and I don't think this is wrong, they're trying to figure out how do we make home more attractive so people will stay at home and not go to other countries, because for reasons of economic activity, you need people. You need people to stay, to start families, to consume goods and services, to invest in a society. So the concern always has been with Australia, Canada, the US and others, that somehow we're taking people and holding them, and therefore they won't come home. And intellectually, I do understand the argument. So we have tried to make sure that our programs are not immigration programs that will rob countries of the best and brightest. We're looking for programs that will allow people to go to Canada or Australia and the United States, get an experience, get skills, but come back to build their society. And everyone in most countries are in this boat that we don't want to lose people. So this is the challenge that we have when we decide how many people should we put into a program like this, because people are afraid that people won't come back. I have more confidence. I remember when I was in Russia, people used to say to me, no matter how bad things were, Doma lucha, home is best. And your language, your families, the mazites you consume, the music you listen to, it's best at home. So I have every confidence that people will come back from Canada to Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania and other places. But that's the sort of challenge that we're faced when we have to decide how large the program is. I also think that with the economic recovery, some of the push factors that made people somewhat hesitant about these programs will not be as apparent. And when jobs are plentiful again in Riga, when the economy is cooking along and there's growth, then we'll all be fighting for access to labor. And then I think it'll be a little easier to design programs that send people to other countries and prepare them to come home and to make a contribution to their society. So that's a very long answer as to why we in consultation with some of our partners, decided that the numbers would be a little smaller than they'd been in the past. But being an optimist, I think we'll come back to those numbers at some point. But it'll be when we're through a recession. That's my feeling. But ultimately, it's a dialogue with our partners in Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia.
So, thank you. You mentioned when we are through recession. So you mean recession was taking place also in Canada, not only in Latvia. So can you then please comment a bit what sort of, we never heard about Lehman Brothers or something like similar like this in Canada. So how did you manage that you don't get in such deep trouble? Well, probably it's part of the image of the country.
I think, well, Oyers and Margaret and others mentioned that 85% of our exports are to the U.S. So Canadian prosperity is dependent on NAFTA, and so that intense trade of $3 billion a day across the border, it's not a Canadian achievement. It's an achievement of 3 countries working together, and it's a partnership. and it's a very successful one. When I was talking about when we get through the recession, I'd slipped into localitis because I'm living in Latvia, and I was talking about the Latvian recession. In Canada, we're still not officially in a recession. We still have growth. The only thing that we can be uniquely possibly proud about, and hubris is, you've got to watch hubris, is that our banking system was very conservative, and possibly we have a little less debt than some people. But our prosperity depends on exporting and others, not just ourselves.
Thank you. Any questions coming up still? Apparently we have reception. Yeah, apparently we still have something ahead, and it is nice outdoors. We have a bit longer walk through the old city and enjoy this beautiful autumn, this evening here around Riga. Thank you all for participation. Thank you, the panelists, for your contributions.